Welcome to the PhD Journey Unplugged podcast. I am Dr. Marilyn Ward, and this is my colleague, Dr. Sarah Gordon. We are the co-founders of this podcast and recent graduates of Concordia University Chicago's doctoral program in leadership in health and human performance. We decided to take our experiences, knowledge, and academic training from our doctoral journey and start this podcast, sharing our voices on topics related to wellness, healthy aging, and purposeful living. Dr. Gordon brings to our discussions a background in psychology and research focused on exercise motivation with older adult athletes. She is a freelance writer for Outside Interactive, writing for Triathlete magazine, as well as a published poet, photographer, and multi-sport enthusiast. Dr. Ward is the founder and owner of No Excuses LLC, a leading health and wellness coaching company. With over 25 years of combined experience in wellness, leadership, and motivational coaching, including 6 years of dedicated service in the United States Air Force. She brings her expertise and discipline to her mission. Dr. Ward's research focuses on enhancing the quality of life and increasing longevity in aging adults. We are both passionate advocates for helping others thrive towards better health and value connecting deeply with our audiences. We strive to empower individuals to take a charge of their health, making lasting changes and transform their lives from the inside out. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. All information and opinions expressed in this podcast are for the general purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Hello, and welcome to the PhD Journey Unplugged podcast. I am Dr. Marilyn Ward, and I have with me my colleague, Dr. Sarah Gordon, but we also have a special guest today. So, Dr. Gordon, can you please introduce our lovely friend here?
Sure. We are so excited to have our former classmate, Dr. Rehan Tahir. We were all cohort. We're all in the same cohort, and we all graduate from Concordia University, Chicago, in the Health and Human Performance program. So we're just really grateful that you're here today. You're our second guest, so we have a little experience having a guest, but it's still new, so bear with us. And it's interesting because we're all different parts of the United States. So Rehan's joining us from the West Coast, Marilyn's from the South on the East Coast, and I'm kind of in the middle somewhere on the East Coast. But we were able to coordinate this call for today. So this is wonderful.
Yes, great minds all coming together to talk. This is going to be exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. So we're on episode 12.
Can't believe it.
I know. And we're going to talk about perspectives on successful aging. And it's interesting because Dr. Tahir, Dr. Ward, and myself, we all did dissertation studies where we focused on older adults, and we came at it from different perspectives. So we're going to have a really great conversation about what we found in our studies and learn from each other, and we hope our listeners learn from us today. So just a little bit about our guest. Dr. Tahir has been coaching and training individuals in health and fitness for over 25 years. He holds a master's degree in applied exercise science with a focus on sports nutrition and human movement science, as well as a PhD in health and human performance. His degrees are from Concordia University Chicago. We talked a little bit before we started this call today. You've been in school for a long time, very focused, have worked hard, and congratulations for being here now with your doctorate.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Thank you both. Yeah.
You're welcome. I always get a little emotional about it because it was a lot of hard work, and we know the three of us, and there's others too, classmates. We were in the trenches together, so we know. So this is a beautiful place to be now. Anyhow, so Dr. Tahir also holds the National Strength and Conditioning Association Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist Certification, the CSCS. And in addition to working with hundreds of clients across various populations, Dr. Tahir Also has 15 years of IT project management experience in higher education.
Mm.
His research focuses on barriers to exercise in older adults with broader interests in sports nutrition. I'm not quite sure how to say this correctly, so help me. Nutricicle? I can't say that word.
Yeah, nutraceuticals, which is basically supplement
Okay,
science. Yeah.
Oh.
nutraceuticals. As Marilyn knows, I struggle with my R's. Anyhow, blood flow restriction training and the intersection of health, fitness, and technology. Born and raised in Southern California, Dr. Tahir, you still live there, you work there.
Mhm.
We're so happy to have you here today. Let me just let our listeners know the title of your dissertation research was Exploring Intrinsic and Extrinsic Barriers to Exercise Among Sedentary Older Adults with Mild to Moderate Depression. And he took a sociological perspective on that. And I'm going to let you kind of talk about your research and share with us. And when you do, if you can maybe explain a little bit what that sociological model is, so our listeners understand that. And before we get started, I just want to say, in reading both, and I guess I'm just going to say Rehan and Marilyn, okay? If that's okay.
Yeah,
Much
of
But
easier.
course.
but when I was reading both of your dedications and acknowledgments, they just touched my heart. And it just shows how much our support of our family and our friends
Yeah.
were in getting to this point. And so I wanted to tell you when I went through and read those, it really, really impacted me, before I started getting into your research. So with that, Rehan, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. We've had a lot of interactions, both virtually and phone, Sarah and I have. And it's really exciting to be here and knowing, especially that we have had research that covers a lot of the same types of topics. And so I think first and foremost, I need to talk a little bit about, you mentioned the dedication. Uh, I would be I would be insincere if I did not mention kind of the motivation behind this. For me, was my own family, my own mother, in fact,
Mm.
who has had a lot of challenges physically, who has not always been able to do a lot of things in terms of physical activity and exercise, but has always kind of had that in their mind that, in her mind that she wanted to, she had that desire to. So I think early on, and then even throughout my master's program, this was a topic that I continued to flesh out and I continued to kind of develop throughout my PhD program. So I was happy that I was able to do it. I had a few ideas that I was tossing around, but this was, I think, the one that hit home the closest for me personally. And so I had a kind of that personal investment in the topic itself. Um, so I'll talk a little bit more about that because I think, in terms of the design of my research study and how it kind of shaped up. Uh, I had reservations initially about my approach, but it turned out to be actually a great idea. So I'll talk maybe a little bit more about that as we go on. So in essence, yes, my research was exploring those intrinsic and extrinsic barriers to exercise. What prevents older adults from exercising? And specifically, my population was sedentary older adults, and I looked at the layer of depression as well. And there were a couple of reasons. Number one is when I was looking through all of this research over several years, I didn't really see a few factors that were really being considered, which was number one, the mental health component. Number two, there was a lot of the research that was done externally outside of the United States. I didn't see a lot of domestic studies. A lot of the studies were done in more homogenous type of countries, which was, I think, important to me. Why I also wanted to talk about or try to include a layer of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic backgrounds, but given that we have such a diverse country, right? And so those were some of the layers that I really wanted to look at. And so that brought me to the question of socioecological perspectives, right? And that socioecological model. And when we talk about the socioecological model, which was, I think, originally coined by Bronfenbrenner, or he developed that framework, I think, in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, 76, don't quote me on the year.
Yeah.
Um, you're looking at those different types of factors, both internal, intrapersonal factors. In other words, what's intrinsic to me, what's my confidence levels, my self-efficacy, right? What drives me internally, and what are those barriers potentially internally versus interpersonal between individuals, for example, family members or friends. And so what do those factors look like? And the model also looks at, for example, community-based factors or societal-based factors, environmental. So then it was also a layer of, well, looking at how might their community or their culture be at play in shaping these behaviors as well, or
Hmm.
perhaps public policies. So it was looking at a kind of a lens of different areas, different influences to try to understand where do these barriers come from. Like, and so when I talked about my research questions, I'm not going to specifically state them, but I think in general, I tried to tell a story. And that
Hmm.
story was number one, what do older adults who are sedentary, who may be dealing with some mental health situations like depression, and by the way, I need to clarify, it's mild to moderate depression. I specifically excluded severe depression where there might be a lot of contraindications or other factors at play because this was not a mental health type of research. But I did want to make sure that I tried to understand those layers. And
Hmm.
so uh, looking at the layers of that research, I kind of lost my train of thought. I apologize.
That's
Mhm.
Uh,
okay.
yeah.
I'm
I'm
so
freezing in here.
enthralled.
I put my air conditioning down. Now I'm freezing, so I've been trying
Uh,
to put the
Okay.
vent.
Take your time.
So, oh well. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So really, the layers of that socioecological model is where I tried to frame my research. So when we're looking at older adults, I think some of the statistics that I saw in the research was anywhere from 13 to 20 something percent, 20% or so of older adults can have depression, subclinically even. And that could be exacerbated when you have comorbidities in older adults, as we know.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a layer of I'm getting older, I'm having to deal with more health issues perhaps. And so that level of diseased aging comes into play versus normal aging process. And that could also exacerbate some of those feelings of depression, right? And so these are the layers that I really wanted to focus on, and kind of look at also kind of the risks of depression. And depression itself could also be a deterrent. It could be a barrier to, exercise for older adults. And physical inactivity also can influence that. So, when looking at those levels, I focused on older adults who were age 60 to 79. That was the frame of the age range that I was looking for. I was hoping to get a mix of both men and women, and also getting a mix of different ethnic and racial backgrounds. And so that was my hope. It didn't quite pan out that way, unfortunately. I did get all female participants, which was perfectly fine. That did not affect the research. And I also did get predominantly white participants as well. There was a couple of, or I think three that identified as non-white. So in the perspective of what I was hoping to get from those perspectives, it may have been lacking a little bit, but I think the value of the information that we received was quite rich, quite in depth. Um, and so that was kind of the design method that I chose was a basic qualitative. I kind of tossed around mixed methods. I believe both of you did a mixed methods approach.
Yeah.
That was my original
I remember
intent as
that.
well.
I remember that. And I was like, wait, I'm doing mixed methods. And then you were like, you were going to do it. And then you ended up, qualitative. I was like, oh
Yeah.
no, I got to do both.
Yeah. And I
No,
re- and
but
I
your study was beautiful. I really, reading through a dissertation, it's like 100 to 200 page document.
right.
yeah,
And I wanted to just compliment you on your writing. I found reading
thank
your
you.
dissertation easy, like very easy to follow. And you did an outstanding job. One thing that I thought was interesting just right off the bat when I was reading through your literature review is how a barrier to exercise is low intrinsic motivation.
Mhm.
And as we settle into this conversation, and I talk about, my participants on the other end of the kind of the continuum of being highly physically active, older triathletes, 65 and older, 60s, 70s, and 80s, I can almost validate that in terms of the patterns of behavior, in terms of what was important to them as a motivating factor, as well as far as enjoyment and satisfaction, inherent satisfaction, which are highly intrinsically motivated behaviors. So it's just so interesting how we're seeing mild to moderate depression on one end with people who perhaps don't feel like they have a lot of control over, behavior or their decisions. And then on my end, seeing people who are highly physically active, quality of life,
Mhm.
feeling they have very much control over things. And one quick thing I wanted to mention, and let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly. It was almost sad. I felt like your participants enjoyed physical activity when they were younger, understood the value of it, but something happened in their life where they just got away from it. Maybe it was just life, maybe it was
Yeah.
injury, disease, I don't know. And it just felt like they lost that sense of joy with it. Did I read that correctly?
I'm going to hit this with a punchline because you hit it pretty much. If I have to give a 20 or 30-second synopsis of everything, you pretty much hit the nail on the head, which was I was trying to tell the story of, first of all, do older adults understand the benefits of exercise? And if they do, what prevents them from exercising? And
Yeah.
given those factors, what could motivate them to exercise potentially? And that is really the biggest finding for me personally, individually, is yes, they had a different perspective that changed throughout their lives,
Right.
which was early on, this was fun, it was carefree, it was sense of community or family or friends. And once the responsibilities, the weight of responsibility hit, when you're talking about work, family, career, just the societal influences alone, because remember, this is a generation that maybe had a different perspective on exercise growing up, especially for women. All the participants were women, and many of them had basically said it wasn't really encouraged for me as a woman or a girl to exercise. It was play, but I wasn't encouraged to go play sports or to be
Right.
physically
Right.
active, right? And so that is really, I think that is the thing is the sense of responsibility never seemed to change over time once
Mhm.
adulthood kind of came into play.
Yeah, it
And
was.
I wonder,
Yeah.
like, we talk about a vicious cycle, and I wonder, like, they found the barriers. Well, then that led to, maybe some depression, and then they couldn't work out. And then from not being able to work out, it's you just kind of get on that cycle of, well, how do I get off of this so I can get back into it? And I see it so much in older adults, but even in mid and young teenage, think about the young teenager going off to college and they don't have that time right now. They don't have time to work out, and then they have an over stress from school that they can't, and then that just it just keeps going. So I think we
Mhm.
see it in like pockets of the different generations, maybe a little different, but it's all we get on this terrible cycle where we find ourselves all of a sudden like struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it was kind of sad for me to read about it because, we're all health promotion. We want to be health promotion leaders and encourage people to live the best lives they can. We always say from the inside out.
yeah.
And it's like we've lost some messaging somewhere along the line for these people. And you never know life circumstances. You don't know, what impact being sick, or
Mhm.
chronic pain or just, different reasons. But I also thought it was interesting, and I was reading in your like your literature review about the lower self-efficacy is seen as a barrier. So I
Mhm.
wanted to direct that to you, Marilyn, because your study looked at self-efficacy.
Right.
So
I 100, that two major surveys. One was the exercise self-efficacy survey, and then the quality of life survey for older persons. And what was really interesting, now I worked I did my study I had a convenient sample. I went back to my old place of employment. It's a very highly, very, you have to have a certain amount of money to get in there, so I didn't even have to ask about financials. We already knew. I did ask about their college level. I wish I would have done like you did and put the bachelor's, master's. I just put like high school, college graduate. I wish I would have been more specific, because my participants all started out already having a very, very high self-efficacy between
Mm.
even my control and my intervention, all the persons. And I thought, it had to have something to do with socioeconomic status. They were already living a very high life. They were all very highly educated. These were doctors and lawyers, professors. And so when I was I was like, how is my intervention even going to help? They already have a very high self-efficacy. But I will say, when I was doing the qualitative, because the quantitative did not, the numbers weren't there. But when I got to dig deep, and that's why I liked looking at yours, Rehan, the qualitative portion, because I know you talked about self-efficacy. I wanted to see what was keeping them going. They were self-motivators. They would say when they were down, they're like, you got to get up, you got to keep going. We're like the train that didn't quit, like I took their quotes and was like, oh my gosh, they're already had that intrinsic motivating factor in them. I wish I would have dug deeper and been like, where'd this come from? Is this from a family trait? Is this something you learned?
Well, that's actually, yeah, that's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking, could it have been a financial, could it have been an educational type of resource that was available to them with the knowledge? I mean, that would be
Right.
very interesting as a follow-up for sure.
Yes.
Well, and I had a question for you, Rehan. When I was reading through your study, I mean, I felt like maybe intrinsic and extrinsic was important because I think I read somewhere in there that they understood the value of exercise, physical activity, but then there was also situations where doctors or somebody would encourage them to exercise. So I was wondering, did you come out of your study thinking it was one or more or balanced or like where did along that continuum, between extrinsic and intrinsic, did you see any patterns there or how do you?
Well, in terms of the motivation, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the pattern that I saw, it seems to fit that most people found that external motivation coming from having an accountability partner. I
Oh.
heard it several times. I just don't have anybody that will go with me. I would love to go because I think, again, they were looking backwards in time when they used to have the most fun, which was being with someone or being with people. Now, there were a couple of exceptions. A couple of folks said, I don't want anybody. I don't want to be with anybody. I just want to be able to do this by myself. But I think the majority seem to kind of hint that they would love some type of, and Sarah, to your study as well, too, the community. You mentioned your
Sense of
triathletes.
community.
That was a big motivator. Well,
Very.
I found that to be similar in terms of maybe not so much a broad community, but at least some type of accountability or friend or partner or even a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of the extrinsic piece, I think what's stopping a lot of people too is the knowledge, right? There is a fear of falling, there's a fear of injury, especially if they lack that self-efficacy. And, I'm sure many of us, your listeners included, when you go to the doctor sometimes and your doctor's like, well, you need to lose 10, 20 pounds, that's all you get. You don't get how.
Right.
And so what does that from a health perspective look like when you need to merge uh, physician advice versus and my population, my sample population was the depression factor too. So mental health advice and also now fitness advice. Where does that come from? How does that support fit? There was one individual specifically I'll remember here. She had never exercised her entire life. It was not something she did, even as a youth. It was not that consistent, I think. But she had an injury and she was prescribed physical therapy for a couple months, 2, 3 months. And she said that in terms of exercise, in terms of her confidence levels, in terms of just the results, that was very encouraging for her. It was highly impactful for her. But then guess what? The injury is now deemed to be resolved. The insurance now does not cover the physical therapy, and so now that resource is removed from her. So what is she supposed to do, right? And so
Right.
that just speaks to, I think, a lot of that too, is sure they may want to, but a lot of people lack the resources or the knowledge or how to.
As a trainer for years, I always told them, I said, it wasn't so much that I was giving them this really profound knowledge. It was to be their accountability partner and to try to instill in them. I'm like, look, you're only paying, I see you 2 days a week, sometimes three for those that had the means to pay for that. But I said, you have to be able to do this on your own. And I can't live with you forever. You're going to have to. So it made me think like I have to be a better coach where I can coach these people to be able to coach themselves when I'm not there, because that was 90% of of the relationship was because they wanted an accountability partner. They wanted somebody there to show up at the gym with them to hold their hand through the workout. Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah,
what kind of maybe what drew us to doing a PhD was we love to educate, right?
Yes.
absolutely. So listening to all of us talk about this topic, and Marilyn, you asked, are some people just born self-motivated, high
Right.
intrinsic, internally regulated behaviors, wants to challenge themselves, wants to be competitive against themselves. I mean, I did see themes like that.
Mhm.
Some of it's environment influences people, some of it's seeing your parents. They want to be motivated, not to, want to have a
Right.
healthier life. But as we talk about mental health, and I'm trying to get my thoughts together, and talk about mild to moderate depression, it feels like your participants, Rehan, lost that sense of control a little bit,
Mhm.
and are experiencing more mental health issues. I mean, we don't know. We haven't done a study together
Right.
and pieced it all
Right.
together. But whereas my participants have had much better luck through something carried them. A lot of them were very physically active in college, let's say even high school, going back that far. Something carried them through all those years into, because my study was 65 and older, and I had
Mhm.
participants in their 80s. Something influenced their long-term adherence to physical activity, which in part impacts how they view aging. And a
Mhm.
very healthy perspective on aging, a very adaptable, flexible, positive perspective on it. So my question then, and we can't really probably answer it without doing a study, but is it random? Is it this intrinsic motivation, this kind of self-determination theory or theoretical framework where we kind of are on this continuum where if you
Yeah.
feel less control, then maybe you go down this more path of depression. When you have more control, take actions for your life, you feel more empowered to have a healthier
Mhm.
life. I don't have the answer, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then what
Yep.
Marilyn's saying is in terms of self-efficacy, and you have financial resources to live,
Right.
just have more
More
resources,
opportunities.
more
Right.
opportunities, how
I
does it
think
impact self-efficacy?
it is so, and I think
Interesting. I think it's
Rayhan,
fascinating.
it is so fascinating. And I think you said the reason why you did this study, was because it touched home with your mom. And mine was the same. I said, well, aging is the one thing, because I trained for years on like obesity, like weight loss was my big thing. And now
Mhm.
I'm like, no, it's aging, because that's one thing we all have in common. We can't stop
Mhm.
it, but we can make it better. So, right, like to be a successful age or XYZ. And I'm like, well, I want to know this for myself because I don't want to end up like my family was very active, very a little overweight, but they were always like my grandmother, they're always on the go, very busy. But it was like, I want to be, and luckily we don't have any like the dementia and we don't, in our bloodline as of now, not gonna wood, but I wanted to be the best aging person. Like the oldest person in my study was a 94-year-old woman. And let me tell you, she outshined all of her peers. She was there every day doing it. And I'd ask her, like, what keeps you going? She's like, just staying active. She's cute, always hair done, makeup. The only thing I used to get her was she always had to wear dressy sandals. I was like, Miss, I don't want to say her name, but I'm like, you have to wear tennis shoes. You cannot be wearing your dressy sandals in here. But that was her whole
But
attitude was
but
like,
why, if you had to think about your data analysis,
yeah,
because if we let's just take three people, okay? We all have it, let's say we all have a 70-year-old. Okay.
okay,
Rayhan has a 70-year-old who has mild to moderate depression. Okay. And maybe enjoyed exercising in their youth, but somewhere along the line lost that joy and sees it more as a barrier, might get hurt, doesn't have the willpower to, the internal, the
right.
drive to want to do it. My 70-year-old is out there doing Ironmans.
Mhm.
No, seriously, seriously,
Right, right.
right?
And they,
Training 3 sports, training, 11 exercise sessions a week, crushing it and feeling like I can do anything.
Right.
And then the lady that you're talking about is, so what is the difference between our three people? What do you think it is?
Right. It's a magical, I don't know.
Well,
I know it's kind of a, hard
No, it's
question,
awesome
but
because it's really making me, like
what is it?
think.
well, and so, and this was kind of one of the things is like, I'm in a very analytical mind, right? I like
Okay.
numbers. Quantitative was like, this is all me, quantitative, right? But like, let me include a little bit of mixed methods so I can get exposure to the qualitative. And then it completely shifted to qualitative altogether.
Right.
So I don't have any definitive evidence from my study about the relationship between depression and physical exercise, although there's a lot of studies out there that do look at that. And
Right.
from my literature review, I think what I found was, there's kind of a mix. There are some studies that say, yes, physical exercise can improve or boost mood and maybe mitigate some depression, while other research not so positive in that aspect. And I think some of the feedback I got from my participants, even qualitatively, will kind of match that. Because one of the questions I asked was, how do they feel exercise impacted mood and depression? And all of them agreed they felt that it could improve it, but not all of them had that experience with it. Some of them said yes, it did, and some of them said no, it didn't.
I
So
read that.
it kind of
I,
matched what we see in the research, right? In
Right.
quantitative side.
I was just gonna say I read that and I thought that was interesting,
Yeah.
actually. I read that they didn't necessarily think that exercise improved their mood.
And
I thought, well,
I
that's
wonder if that
interesting.
has
What is
something to
that?
do with, is that has something to do with with attitude on exercise, right? And if you tell a client, well, we got to go run 5 miles today, and they're like, oh, I got to go run 5 miles. And they're mad the whole time. And they don't, because I always say, enjoy the journey. You say, smell the roses. And they're mad the whole time. It's like that's their attitude. They're not going to see the benefit, right? Because there are tons of studies that talk about having that if you believe it, it's going to happen. Or if you
Hmm.
believe, like they do this with diet pills, the placebo. If you believe that this is going to work, then you're
Yeah.
like, yes, and you're open to it, and your mind is open to it, and you're like, yes, this is going to work, and I'm going to love it, and this exercise is going to help me. Or they're going to be a negative Nancy, and they're like, no, this doesn't do anything. So I wonder if it has something, again, it's intrinsic. It's got to be something with behavior and attitude,
Hmm.
how receptive they are, how accepting they are.
I
And
think
Yeah.
you said the word. I think it's one word, it's powerful and very individualized in terms of the meaning for each person. Enjoyment.
yeah,
Hmm.
if
Yep.
they enjoy
Enjoyment.
it or if they're looking
And
at it
then
like just another thing I got to do and
how do
just
we, as
journey.
self-promotion leaders, how do we get
Yeah.
people to enjoy
Yeah.
being physically active? Because the research, we know everything positive about it, how it can, it just improves so much
Oh
of
yeah, I took notes and
health.
I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I loved how all of us talked about physical activity or inactivity and how
Yeah,
it leads to chronic disease and
great.
so
So how do
And
we
these,
build enjoyment back into it for our population of 60, 60 plus, we'll say 60 plus, because your study was 60 to 79. Mine
yeah.
was 65 and older. And Marilyn, I think yours was
uh, I
61.
was taking 65 and older, but my youngest participant I think was 70 or
Yeah.
72.
So
Mhm.
how do we maintain enjoyment in those years? How do we
Well,
communicate that?
I know that's a great question. And that's something that I covered a little bit in my study. And I think kind of going back to what you both had alluded to and said was it was just another chore for most of my participants, right? It was like just
Yeah.
another thing I got to do. Then they kept putting it off because it no longer became about being play or being fun as when they were younger. It became another
Right.
to-do list, right? But really, when I did ask them about what could motivate them, and that enjoyment was a big part of it, like finding activities they enjoy. But
Mhm.
then there is this tight relationship with the barriers. For example,
Mm.
somebody might say, I love walking outdoors. I just want to go and walk with my spouse, or I want to walk with my friend and I want to go get some coffee and then come back and make that my routine. However, in the summertime, it's like 90 degrees and humidity, or I got to worry about falling in the wintertime because of the rain and the ice. So it's like they had this picture of what they would enjoy, but then they would fall back to the deterrents, the barriers, the things that got in their way.
Interesting.
Hanging on
Interesting.
as their excuses, which is why I picked my business name was No Excuses, because that's the first thing people do when they come to you, right? So they give you a million reasons as to why they can't do something. So then it was my job to figure out, all right, well, here's your obstacle or your deterrent now. And I would make them be a part of it. I said, how are we, because I can't do it alone, right? They go home on their own when they're done. How are we together going to help you get over those obstacles or the deterrent? Like, oh, okay, well, now it's, raining outside. Well, let's, take an umbrella, wear your galoshes, as my grandma would say. I guess having to, but a lot of the time in a study, right, we don't have a lot of time to
Mhm.
do all that, right? We don't have time to sit down individually and say, and you're doing a study. But I wonder if even now, if you look back to your participants, I wonder if you, and being a part of a study, have sparked interest back into them and maybe made them more mindful of wanting to get back out.
Hmm.
Have you ever went back and asked?
Oh, well, I had several comments at the end of it, like, I'd never
Oh,
thought
good.
about these things before. This is amazing. Thank you for letting me go through this and think about it. So I had
Yeah,
at least 4 or 5 I can recall that
I think that's
individuals that said
exciting.
that. Yeah.
So Rehan, I'm just curious because I didn't gather this data. And I think it would have been so interesting if we had a talk when we were running our studies and we
Yeah.
all collected the same demographic information.
Yeah.
Did you collect socioeconomic status? Or do you
Uh,
have an
I
impression of how where that they might have fallen on that?
I collected education level. I did not collect socioeconomic level because I felt like I already had several participants or prospective participants who were a little worried initially about, is this real? What is this all about?
Right.
And if I had screened that in my survey, I think that may have negatively impacted it a little bit more. But I
Well,
can tell you that the question came up in the research, and I think most people did have mixed experiences. Like they had different layers of highs and lows socioeconomically throughout their life.
Hmm.
And I can say certainly that, where it was a limitation, it was a severe limitation. Like,
so that's interesting because, my mind, researcher mind, the sport of triathlon is expensive, especially if you're really, if you're at the half Ironman or Ironman level and you're in worlds championships and you're traveling across the world and beautiful locations. It's in the equipment, the
Yeah.
travel expenses. I mean, I'm not just talking about smaller races at the local level, but if you're really in it at a higher, international level, it's an expensive sport. And
yeah,
I'm not saying anything that, well, most people know that. So I think you have to have some type of resources to
yeah.
be 65 and older and be in that space. Now, I didn't collect it, but I'm just kind of surmising that, maybe that's, you know, maybe
Yeah.
they are at a higher socioeconomic level, but I didn't collect it, so I don't know for sure.
Right.
And you're saying, Marilyn, that your population who were kind of crushing your intervention and very positive about
Yeah.
it, and were in a nice facility and probably have
Oh, they
needs.
so
So
many
that's
different things.
interesting. That would be an interesting research study
Yeah.
to see how
Mhm.
socioeconomic level, as you
Oh,
get
yeah.
older, impacts your perspectives on physical activity.
Oh, yeah. My methodologist even mentioned it. He's like, no, what are you going to do with this data? And I said, well, I really would like to compare it to a lower socioeconomic status
Yeah,
because here they're all in a facility, right? They're all in this big, large community where they've got a walk semi like walking path, but they have a mini gym. They're now building a brand new, beautiful fitness facility, but they have yoga and they have, I taught the physical class, the exercise class there, but they have, everything from in all different levels, from independent to assisted memory. Everybody had access to fitness. And, of course, they're eating delicious meals in the dining facility. And we had nutrition classes. And so they had everything to their disposal that they needed to stay healthy. So it was really up to them if they wanted to. But I would love to compare it to people who are not living in a community, living in a community, but not in a where they're all together, like on a campus.
Mhm.
And maybe they don't have access to the gym, and maybe they don't have access to the funding and to get somewhere. So I think it'd be hard to pull that to I don't even know where to begin as far as like trying to put participants together for that type of study, but I definitely would love to compare.
Mm.
Yeah, and
I,
Rehan, when you talk about your implications of your research, you have affordability.
yeah.
That is something that you already started to surmise, when you
Okay.
thought about your study.
I hearing you both speak, I'm curious. Did you find that most of your participants were retirees, or I think Marilyn, maybe yours
All
especially
mine
were.
were retired. Yeah, they're all.
A large percentage of mine were, but some were still,
Okay.
and even if they were retired, they were like active in
Yeah.
organizations and charity work. I mean, these are highly intrinsically motivated individuals who are, very involved in
Yeah.
things that
Okay.
they're passionate about. So, I guess the question is kind of, I actually got an email from somebody, read my dissertation, just somebody out in the world, and was like, well, so what? I hate to put that on us, the three of us, but what's the takeaway here?
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
They did. I got an email. What's your so what? And my so what is that, from a health promotion perspective, our goal is to promote healthy living and the importance of
Mm.
Right.
physical activity and feeling some sense of control over your life. And if we're going to live longer, then let's live longer with health, with good health.
Right.
Added years. So that's the so what. We're just coming at it from different
Yeah.
perspectives.
Yeah.
And I think like if we had to put a definition, because I think we all talked about successful aging
Yes.
in our studies, and mine came right out, and I can't remember the source that I used, but it said like there is no one definition. You can ask this group of people and they're going to say this. Like my independent living, residents thought that this being independent was their, and I used to tell them I had changed the name of my study so many times, but my root was like, I want to keep the independent living residents living independently for as long as possible. And I use the health belief model. So we talked about fear. Well, here you are at this age. This can happen at this age. Here's and it was like a fear factor. Well, I don't want this to happen. So I'm going to exercise, and then that won't happen. So they felt like they had a hand in building their, successful aging story. But it's, there's no one, there's so many different parts. And so both of you share what, like,
Yes, sorry.
and then I'll, yeah, tell you what mine
Go
was.
ahead, Rayhan. I'll let you go next.
Yeah. So, well, this is first of all great conversation, and I think when I first conceptualized this topic, the component that I was going to include in this research was a home-based intervention. That was the idea, was understand the problem, but then implement some type of home-based solution that could help, get these folks inspired to at least maybe start an exercise program and maybe adhere to it. But as complexity went on, it became a little less feasible to do that for a dissertation. However, the end goal remains the same. The so what remains the same, which is how do you get these individuals to start exercising and realize it's never too late, right?
Yeah.
We see the research, neuromuscular adaptations can happen even at advanced ages. It doesn't matter if
Yeah.
they've had previous exercise experience or not. So the message is it's never too late. How do we get them to start and to then adhere?
hmm I love that. Yeah, I love that. And you're right. The research does show you can take somebody in their 80s and 90s and start strength training, and the body, obviously, it's different. The
Yeah.
adaptation's different because you're older, and we understand sarcopenia and the changes, as we age, but you can see some adaptation in a
Yeah.
positive direction. It's the human body's fascinating.
Yep.
As far as defining successful aging, you're right, Marilyn. I found in my literature review, it's an evolving concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to Rowan Kahn, like the
Mm,
late 1980s. And I think traditionally successful aging was avoiding disease.
mhm,
Yeah.
And people didn't necessarily have that much, in terms of the definitions, control over that process, right?
mm,
We
Right.
get older and we get age-related illnesses. And I think that the new kind of evolving way of looking at successful aging is that we know through modifiable lifestyle habits, we can have more control over this, right? And I think that's where the definition's changing. Like we can take, and maybe that's the health promotion um, communications that we want to have out there, with clients and whatnot, is that you can take these actions and you can improve the quality of your life. You can, you can slow down some of the age-related decline that
Yeah.
we see. So for me, it was founded on like Roe and Con, and how we changed from kind of this like disease model to like, okay, you have more control over taking actions to age successfully.
And I
Mm.
think that's how it used to be, right? Back in the day. And I was even looking at the different certifications that you can get now. And one, some of them use the disease prevention, and or the clients came to you already with a disease and you were trying to fix it. Now it's more on the prevention. What can we do? We're going to stop it. And we see that our seniors are living longer and more boldly. Like your
Uh,
study with, like, they're not just living, they're living like that higher quality
really
of life. And
crushing
I think you put that in
it.
your study too. Like, living longer is one thing, but you're like, but the higher quality of life. And I was like, oh my God, I love that sentence. I love
Yeah,
Yeah.
that in your study.
it's not just lifespan, it's health
Yeah,
span.
right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right? So
are
we
we
know we're
just,
living longer.
yeah.
We although I'm not 100% sure about that research. I've kind of read it like I don't know about life expectancy, but I think we are living longer, I think in general. But we're also on a lot of medications, society, and the three of us know we have like very high percentages of, chronic illnesses in
Yeah.
aging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alzheimer's disease, dementias, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, I mean, all those things. But we know that physical activity can have a very positive impact on all of that. So, believe it or not, I mean, I know the three of us, we should do this again, actually.
Yes,
Would you
because
like
this
to come
time went
back?
by way too fast. I just looked at the
Yes.
clock and
Oh
I'm
my
like,
goodness.
come
It's
on.
already.
We just scratched the surface of this.
But Rehan, I want to go back to just real quick because I wrote this down. I was like, this is it. What you said here, the implications, the so what. Physical therapy and personal training designed specifically for older adults can address mobility concerns and improve confidence. And exactly what you said. Well, sometimes as we get older, we need knee replacements and hip replacements, or we
Mhm.
fall. We need something between physical therapy, you're out of physical therapy, and then feeling comfortable getting in the gym and working with a personal trainer.
Yep.
And insurance doesn't cover that space.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
It
And
doesn't.
that's where we need to have the consistency for these individuals. I believe that.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
and I think when you talk about successful aging, my population, my sample population, I don't think many of them, maybe a couple of them, could not ever envision themselves competing in a triathlon. I think for them, mentally, that possibility doesn't exist, although all three of us know that does exist. In their minds, I think they would talk themselves out of it. I think for them, my takeaway is successful aging for many of my participants was, I just want to play with my grandkids,
Oh,
mhm.
I
right?
love that.
Yeah.
Just
I
functional fitness.
I just want to function. I
Yes.
don't want to have those aches and pains, and I want to be able to have a quality of life that means something. So,
Yeah, I love that. And let me just make sure the three of you understand and our listeners understand, like I'm not even suggesting everybody should be a triathlete. I just thought it would be interesting to study people kind of like
oh yeah,
at that end of it because
Oh,
they
yeah.
are kind of the exception. Their peers are not necessarily living, highly physically active lives in that way.
no,
Well, we will have, if you would like to come back, I think we should continue this conversation because I think it's deeply
Yeah.
meaningful. I know, like the American College of Sports Medicine, they have the whole exercises medicine platform. And like you said when we started, you don't go to the doctor and the doctor say, I really think you need to do personal training and exercises. They don't necessarily get too much into all of that. So I think there's a lot of growth for all of us
yes.
um,
Yeah.
if you look at exercise as medicine.
I would love to come back and maybe we can talk about some potential research that we can all look at.
I
That would be
know.
great.
It'd
Yes.
be
Future
great.
studies.
Um, we always like to kind of wrap up with strategies. So I wrote a few down, but you guys feel free to just add some. I mean, we know the importance of physical activity as a strategy to maybe slow the aging process or at least feel better, adapting to aging, keeping your mind engaged, We all know how important that is for cognitive health, social connection, staying engaged with others,
Mm.
which would be interesting. You talk about research the three of us could do. That would be interesting to measure social connections with depression scales,
Mhm.
how isolated somebody feels, because like you said, in my study, community was huge. So
Yeah.
that would actually be very interesting. Nutrition, positive attitudes and mindset, managing stress, being adaptable, flexible, making peace with aging. Um,
No,
anything
I'm going down fighting.
anything you want to add, Marilyn?
I think I'm going to steal it from your study and make it enjoyable. If you're
Mhm.
whatever activity you're doing, if it's not bringing you a smile or enjoyment and it's feeling like a task, you won't stick with it. So I think you
Yeah.
have to find something, maybe it's dancing, something as simple as dancing that makes you smile, skipping. I used to say you can't skip without smiling. So whatever it is that you're doing, you have to find enjoyment from it.
Excellent. Rehan, any
Gosh,
strategies out from the West Coast?
I don't know how I can follow up those two. I mean, enjoyment's a huge one too. But I mean, I would echo all of that and just say it's never too late to start. I think we mentioned that earlier. It's
Yeah.
never too late to start. Don't be afraid. The resources are out there, even though it may not seem like it. But I think
Yeah.
just got to put one foot in front of the other. That's really at the end of
Yes.
the day.
Perfect.
Um, I have to do a quote.
I was thinking you're going to get away with not doing one
I know, right?
today.
But when three of us, it's like it's just timing it. So okay, so I decided instead of quoting somebody else, some famous person, I wanted to quote one of my participants who said, when I asked how do you define successful aging, doing what you can to stay physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy, recognizing that there are changes that are part of the process. And I think that demonstrates that you take actions
Yeah.
to improve aging, but have some grace in the
Mhm.
acceptance of aging. And I thought that was a very kind of balanced perspective on successful aging.
That was great. And hey, if they're the age they are doing it, the triathlons, I'm going to go ahead and take that.
Yeah.
Like, best advice ever.
Uh, there's so many, as we know, because this is our first major study as doctoral students, there's so many more questions that we can ask. And I don't know about the two of you, but I always got like the best dissertation study is a finished dissertation research project,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
Yep.
For our listeners and for our PhD students out there, if you're listening, you have great ideas, but at the end of the day, you want to finish. But I think there's so many questions that my study for me are kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
left unknown still. And so yeah.
We're not done yet, right? We're not done yet.
Nope. Got to roll up our
Yeah.
sleeves. More work to do.
That's
Yeah, I would
right.
love to dive, Rehan, into your, like what were those life experiences that derailed people a bit? I think that'd be really interesting to just go right there,
Yeah.
find out, what was it that kind of took that joy away from you. And so, all right, guys. Well, that went by fast.
I know.
Um, next week we're going to talk about finding mental clarity and focus. And I wanted to add, like, when you feel like you're stuck in the middle of the forest. So I know for me, over the
Oh.
past 5 years, there were many days that I literally felt like I cannot get out of this forest. Like, where's the light? So how do we help people kind of move forward when you're feeling, very overwhelmed and you don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel? So I think that's what we're going to talk about next week.
Another great.
Rayhan, we loved having you on the show.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming.
I love being here. It was great. Looking forward to
Yeah,
next week.
Great.
and we'll definitely do this again. And Marilyn, final takeaway.
Yay.
No pressure.
Enjoy life. Enjoy life. Like, let's not make it such a chore. Let's just enjoy life that we have, right? We have a lot. We are here. We're kicking. We're living. Let's enjoy it.
Amen.
Let's just
All
do
right,
it all.
guys. We'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.